So we've taken a look at the 2024 stimulus material and we've thought about all the different ways that it can help us write a fantastic piece. Today's video is showing you two pieces that have been written in response to that stimulus material. One of them doing a very forced, ham-fisted job of just including all the details from the stimulus material, and the other one working more subtly with it. That's not to say that the first piece I'm going to show you is completely and utterly terrible. It does have some positive points, but you will see some traps that sometimes students fall into when they overdo it with the stimulus and forget the main points of the task. I would encourage you to take a look at both of these pieces and take the time to read them in your own time so you get a sense of how you can work with either piece, and either piece can help you with how you can work with the stimulus material overall. Let's take a look at piece A. Remembering that this is not a complete piece, this is probably about halfway finished, but it does enough to illustrate the point. I've had it. I can't do it anymore. Every time I look to put my neck out and protest against the way things are, I get put back in my place. I'm fighting, resisting the powers that run our lives, and I'm growing tired of it. I don't think I can hold on much longer and keep up this fight. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not a terrible opening. There's nothing here to say, oh my gosh, this is irrelevant and awful. All right, there's a clear voice here. There's a bunch of exclamation marks. There's a clear attempt to connect with a reader and build an audience through the way, build a relationship with the audience by the way that it's speaking directly to them. We get a sense of voice of this person that, has reached the end of their tether. And so there's some quite good things that are going for it. But let's take a look at some things that perhaps could be done a little bit better. To start with, we have this idea of using the actual word protest. Now, I'm going to be really careful here in saying that it's not a rule to say that you can't use the word protest, but just be aware that when you do use it, you don't want to always be using it in a really obvious way. The very best pieces are the ones that are able to explore and examine ideas about protest and have a think about those things and really grapple with some deeper ideas without always saying, oh, I'm thinking about protest in that very, clear and obvious way. This takes some practice. So as I said, it's not about you never using the word protest, but I'd say here that it's probably just that little bit too obvious with the way that it says, every time I put my neck out and protest against the way things are, I get put back in my place. Not awful, okay, but if we're really looking to get to that top end of marks and really improve our piece, this is something where we could do a slightly better job. To have a look at the second piece that I'll show you later in this video to get a better sense of how we can do these things. Notice as well that it uses words like resisting. It's using words directly from the title. Again, not a rule. It's not saying that you definitely can't or that you shouldn't do it. I would much rather you write a piece where my feedback to you was, you've used the words from the title quite a bit and it's a bit repetitive, rather than giving you the advice, you never engage with the title whatsoever. Finding the balance, like all things with this task, is what is key. I don't think I can hold on much longer and keep up this fight, it says as that first section finishes. It's a pretty clear way of saying, yes, I'm going to engage with the title of I've got to persist and I've got to continue to resist. It is doing it in, like I said, an adequate fashion, but I think we could do a better job. Let's see how this piece continues. I get it though. That's how they want us to think. Now, I really like that as a start to a section or a paragraph here. That's what they want us to think. It's pretty intriguing. As a reader, I'm reading this piece thinking, right, okay, who's they? And that's what they want us to think. I'm intrigued, and I have this sense of, okay, there's some thinking that I'm going to have to do here as I read this piece. By they, I mean the powerful, the rich, the heartless. So it's kind of gone and explained it directly for me. I don't love that. It's not treating me as a reader as someone who can work with things and more subtle ideas. It's just flat out explaining every last little detail. They throw so much at us to distract us from protesting against what they do. But no matter how much I have to put up with or how hopeless I feel, I'll never stop. I will persist until there's nothing left. So you can see there with the I will persist until there's nothing left that again, it's just a little too obvious. Like I mentioned before, I'd much rather you be too obvious than be completely irrelevant and off guard. So keep that in mind in finding a good balance with the advice from this video. It's not saying to never use those terms, but it's about being able to do more with them rather than just repeat exactly what they mean. Because if I don't do it, then who will? Whenever we stand up against things that are wrong, there always must be the one person who stops the dominoes from falling. One person who sees things for how they are and stands up against everything and says stop. Now, if I was being really critical here, I'd say that that section is really just a description of the picture. And for some reason, some students, when they lack a bit of confidence with this task, they find themselves doing that, thinking that that will help them, climb the ladder of achievement with this task. Remember, what you do with the stimulus material is not directly assessed in a way where, oh, did you do a great job with the stimulus material or did you describe them as stimulus material? It's more so about what that stimulus material allows you to do in terms of your ideas, your purpose, your voice, your structure that you choose to write with. That's all of the good stuff that you want to be finding that comes from the stimulus material. You're not collecting points by just mentioning all the details from the stimulus material. If I was assessing this as a teacher and a student had written this for me, I'd be asking them, well, why did you write that? And I'd assume that their answer would be something along the lines of, I thought I had to mention all of the stimulus material, which, as said in the first video that we did on stimulus material, you are to use at least one of the 3 stimulus. You don't have to touch on all of them, nor should you just stick at very basic descriptions of what they are saying. I will resist and I will bring others with me in the fight. We will persist against those who look to control us, and our protests will be heard, and we won't stop until we get what we need. So at this point of the piece, I am starting to wonder what this student is trying to say. Now, I say this student, I wrote this, okay, but keeping up these appearances that this was written by a student, I wrote this to illustrate a point that here, by the 4th section of this piece of writing, I haven't gone off and said anything different outside of the title. Earlier on, I was saying, I'll persist until there's nothing left. And then here I'm saying, we won't stop until we get what we need. I am saying the exact same thing, just with slightly different language. I'm not expanding upon the title, bringing in other thoughts, doing all of those things that are going to help us do a really good job. If the 4th paragraph or section of my piece basically says the exact same thing that the 2nd paragraph says, well, then there's not much point of it being in there, and I'm kind of wasting my time and repeating myself. It's like I've always been told, if you fell down yesterday, stand up today. I live by those words because of how my fighting has got me in trouble in the past. If I didn't, I would have given up a long time ago, because the truth about protest is that you've got to persist and stick with it. No one will listen if you just say your piece and then disappear. Now, there's some good that's coming through here in terms of, I just mentioned that we need to expand into other ideas, and there is this different idea that's come up here, which is that you have to persist, because if you just say something once and then disappear, that has no impact, and that you have to keep fighting. But it has done so in a really obvious manner, in a really clunky sort of manner by, quoting the stimulus material directly there with, if you fell down yesterday, stand up today. The idea was right, to use the stimulus material to get to different ways of thinking and to show some different ideas, but the execution came through in a pretty plain sort of a way by just saying, I'm going to repeat exactly what the stimulus material said. For me, it's about choosing the right cause and then fighting for it. It's not just protesting for protesting's sake. We've got to stand up and be heard. That's the 3rd piece of stimulus material. Hasn't brought in anything original with it. Hasn't brought in any further thinking or any other ways of exploring the idea. And when they shoot us down, we've got to get up and get going again. You can notice here that second last sentence, second last section is just mentioning what was said 2 paragraphs before with the fell down yesterday, stand up today. It's nothing new, it's just repeating. Resist and persist. We must. So I think the point has been made here about the way that we can use the stimulus material sometimes in too laboured a fashion. But I definitely don't want to hang around and just point fingers at this sample piece and say, wow, how terrible, or anything like that. Because there are some positives that are there. It has used the stimulus material in order to talk about ideas about protest and the challenges that come with protest. It has definitely stuck to the title, probably too tightly, but as I mentioned before, I'd rather you stick to the title rather than you completely ignore it. And it does have a voice to it, okay? There are different sentence lengths, there are sentence structures, there is a sense of a person being behind this. Resist and persist. We must. All right, it's got some things going there for it, but I think we can see that it is very laboured in the way that it looks to have its very first focus being, let's make sure that I put in all of the stimulus material. Let's take a look at this second piece to get a sense of how we can use the stimulus material without just writing it out in slightly different words or even the same words. And the second piece begins. Let them have it. Let the dominance and ignorance continue until we are all just subservient drones, happy with whatever's left for us once the powerful have had their way. Let things continue on unchallenged, slowly morphing this world into a mess where people don't even know what to stand up against anymore. So, a clear jumping quality here, and I want you to be aware of the things that are making this piece better. One of the first things you might have noticed is the language use, all right? Morph, subservient drones, unchallenged, ignorance, dominance. There is clearly a clearer sense of language and a better use of language that is happening here. But there is also the way of working with the stimulus material. We're talking about resist and persist, and this person is starting off by saying, let them have it. It's someone that has looked at this stimulus material, and rather than just saying, oh, cool, I'm going to say resist and persist 25 different ways, they've structured their piece where the person who is writing is starting in a moment of weakness. Let them have it, okay? I can't put up this fight anymore. I can't persist with my resistance anymore in the way that I have been doing. Look at this second paragraph though. That's how they want us to think. Remember in the first piece how it had they and then it explained who they were and did so in a pretty obvious way? Look at what this piece does. It's what they push every day through the non-stop news cycle, the constant barrage of problems and the constant scapegoating that deflects from the true cause of many of our issues. It's easy to do nothing when you feel that nothing will help. So it's taking this idea of how do we persist in our protest, and it's taking a look at it in a way of saying, wow, we get barraged with all of these things and all of these problems and all of this scapegoating and all of this deflecting from real issues, and it's all been done to try and wear us down so that we won't persist. So therefore the title is driving what the piece is about, but the piece isn't just about the title and nothing else. And that's a really important skill, and one that is by no means simple, but one that you can continue to work on if you're very aware of what you're trying to do as you write these pieces. How can we care about anything when we're swamped with the injustice of everything every day? So there's clear, attempts at a voice here. We've got very clear structural decisions with single lines and questions being put directly. Notice how the voice is coming across as a person that's, reflecting and expressing and putting themselves forward, but at the same time not writing in a way where it's like, hey, you reader, I'm speaking directly to you. It's still asking questions though, and so this voice is really starting to build. It's not easy, but we must find the strength within ourselves to push back against those who oppress and manipulate us. Even if our bellies are full, our houses warm, and our bank balance is healthy, we can only be content when we know that there are opportunities for all and that no member of our society suffers from disadvantage or discrimination. It may seem idealistic to put out such a statement, but consider this. That's exactly what those who benefit from current systems and policies want us to believe. They want everyone going about their daily business and allowing things to go the way they did the day before and the day before that, because that means that the game stays rigged in their favour. So this is really quite subtle, but I would suggest that there is an element of the picture here in that, okay, let the dominoes fall where they will, let things happen the way they did before. That's what people want. It's difficult to stand up and be the person who stops things just happening the way that they always did. And then, of course, also this idea of, having to choose our battles as well, in terms of, not just having to be a little more discerning about the way that we fight back against certain injustices. It's not blatantly obvious, but as I said before, the one thing that must be not obvious but clear in your piece is that you've responded to the title, and after that you are to use the stimulus material to get to other ideas and other ways of thinking. You don't have to hit the assessor or the teacher over the head with it over and over again. So what do they do when one person dares to question the status quo? I think that's an even closer link to that visual stimulus too. One person dares to question the status quo. When an individual refuses to play the game and looks to disrupt the everyday expectations, they make a fool out of them. They use words like radical woke activists to undermine the message of questioning power and its beneficiaries. So again, you could look at this and say, oh, well, of course the second one's better. He uses much nicer language and the piece just rolls off the tongue better and all of that. And that is true. But the main thing that I want you to get out of this is that look at how that's taken that picture, that idea of someone not going along with what everyone else wants them to go along with. But then it's brought out this idea that, you know what powerful people do? When someone stands up against them, they look to make a fool out of them. Now, that's not mentioned in the stimulus material. So what that means is that as a student writing this, I'm showing that when I look at stimulus material, I can be inspired to bring in other ideas that I have. And so this idea about, talking about a radical woke activist and these types of things about looking to humiliate those who protest or undermine them, that wasn't in the stimulus material, but I've been able to get to it because of what I've been inspired by. And that's what I'm talking about, where we meet our prior knowledge and ideas and structures and ways that we write with what's there on the stimulus piece. It means that we're not just writing the same things over and over and over again. And why wouldn't they? It's worked for a very long time and continues to do so. Have you ever thought about why we slam those who dare to protest? Why we shake our heads and tell them that their efforts are annoying and ineffective? It's to solidify the idea that the current way of doing things is the right way of doing things, and that any suggestion as to changing that is an act of stupidity. So just like the first piece, this one is probably about halfway finished. And I know that if I was going to finish this piece now, I'd be writing about making sure that this idea of, okay, so I've outlined the problem, a person must persist against this, and that, always coming back to resistance and persistence, but bringing in other ways that, shine a light on that sort of idea. Thanks so much for watching this video. It is in response to the stimulus video that we put up quite recently as well. Make sure that you've had a look at that one. All of these videos and many, many more are a part of our online platform, the Lab. There is a link in the description to this video that will give you some further details about how you can access all of those videos as well as all of our readings and so much other content. Be sure to check that out. But until I see you next time, all the best with your studies and good luck.